All right, we are live. Happy Friday Eve, everyone, as I like to call it on a Thursday. Welcome back to the April Town Hall here with MAD Security. Again, I have with me Jacqueline Jones, the GRC lead here at MAD Security as well. We definitely appreciate you coming back. Again, I am Adam Starnes, the account manager here at MAD Security, and we're really glad that you're joining us today. As always, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to be here. And thank you for those who join us regularly. We truly appreciate the continued engagement. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. Glad you're here. Before we jump in, I want to set some expectations. Today's session is meant to be practical and reflective on Q1 of the year. Last month, we had a really strong town hall that we brought Jeff from Realm One on to speak with us. Jeff and his team took the proactive approach to CMMC. They engaged with MAD Security to help answer questions, guide them through the process, and help them fill gaps across their people, processes, and technology. And they already had a really solid foundation. The SPRS score is really good already, but they knew where they needed support, and that's when they approached MAD Security. Because of that, they were able to successfully pass their CMMC Level 2 assessment. So we spent about 45 minutes with some technical difficulties on the last town hall talking about the experience that Jeff spoke about, his experience that he had with us here at MAD Security. If you missed it, I highly recommend going back and watching it. You can go to our website or you can go to YouTube and type in MAD Security. It's on the MAD Security channel. And it's essentially a live testimonial or a reference call if you're looking to validate what the process with MAD Security actually looks like. So today we are shifting gears a little bit. So instead of focusing on one success story, we're zooming out and asking, where do you stand now that Q1 is complete? Not where you plan to be, not where you hope to be, but where you are today in the real 2026 CMMC landscape. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I am joined again by Jacqueline Jones. She works hands-on with organizations every day as they navigate these exact challenges. So let's go ahead and dive in. All right, so at the beginning of the year, most organizations had a plan. Things like improve my SPRS score, complete a gap assessment, start beginning remediation steps, prepare for an audit. Now that Q1 is behind us, are you where you wanted to be? You had a plan, you've looked at your progress, but be honest, have things slowed down? And this isn't by judgment, it's easy to do because we are seeing this across the market. What we're seeing is a lot of organizations started really strong, but execution didn't fully carry out through Q1 as planned. And the gap between intention and execution is where the risk begins to build. So Jacqueline, where do you typically see that organizations fall short between planning and execution early in the year?
Sure. So since the phase rollout began November of last year, of course, that was a lot of people were extremely motivated to, get a gap assessment done, identify the things you need to get in place, remediation efforts that you need to have made, and maybe they've laid out, a roadmap or some kind of, set milestones. But as the months have gone by, what they've realized is, technical configurations may take longer than they expected. Sometimes, it does take a while to test and roll out a full implementation of a new solution that your team has never used. Trainings involved, things like that. Another thing is, what if you are a small IT team and you wear many hats? And so your day-to-day activities usually take up most of your time, and you just don't have the time to spend on CMC efforts. So those are some of the common things that we see of why maybe you're not on track at this point. It's not because you didn't have the motivation, you didn't have a way forward, but it's just, daily life comes into place. Maybe people took vacations. You didn't count on someone being out a week. Maybe your, head of your company decided that there's other higher priorities. So again, it's not really like intentional. It's just they just for some different reasons just weren't able to follow like a game plan, things like that. And maybe they just didn't have an understanding of the CMC controls to begin with. So if they were trying to do it on their own versus, hiring a third party to help them, maybe they got to a certain point, decided that it was just too much, too overwhelming, or maybe they didn't, properly interpret a control. So they went down the wrong path and they're having to backtrack. But essentially we are seeing a lot of organizations, like Adam mentioned, it is pretty common that they're just maybe not at the point that they thought should be right at this, at this time. And again, it's a common thing we're seeing these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely not intentional like everything else. What we plan on, if we plan on it taking an hour, it takes 2 hours. That's just how it is. So no, we're definitely seeing it all across the board for sure. All right, so let's talk about what has actually changed so far this year. We're seeing increased urgency from primes. A big example of that, we just saw the L3 Harris all over LinkedIn and Inside Things. The letter went out saying, hey, you got till July 31st to become CMMC compliant ready or level 2 certified to continue doing business with them. We've been talking about supply chains for a long time. We're starting to see that increased urgency from those primes. More organizations are starting to enter the assessment phase. So we have a lot of people calling up and asking, hey, am I ready for my assessment? Can we verify that? Because I want to get that C3PAO scheduled so we can get this knocked out. A lot more of that's happening this year in 2026, already started ramping up in Q1. And less tolerance from primes and DOD and all around from we're working on it. People are wanting to start seeing physical proof, POEMs, documentation, even some people starting to say we're ready for you to go ahead and get us that certification so that we can prove that you actually are indeed doing it. So a big driver of this is coming from the primes themselves. They're starting to push harder. They're asking for proof, evidence, timelines, not just intent, as I'd mentioned just a moment ago. And because of that, more organizations are moving into the assessment phase, whether they're ready or not. And that's kind of a dangerous thing. We talk to people every day who say our goal is to be compliant ready by November 2026. And that may be your internal goal, but your real deadline is going to be when it shows up in your contracts. And you need to be ready for that, whether it comes earlier than expected or not. The market has turned pretty quickly. Jacqueline, from what you've been seeing, how's pressure from the primes changed the pace of organizations, the way they're moving towards the compliance readiness?
Sure. So with the phase rollout, so November of last year, it was phase one. And so that was the phase of, everyone can do it. Most people can do a self-assessment, not necessarily everybody. But and then November of this year is going to be those CMC certification requirements. You're going to start seeing those in contracts. So a lot of organizations think, well, I've got until at least November, and then I can start thinking about becoming certified upon contract by the time I get awarded a contract. What we've been seeing, though, like he mentioned from the primes have to line up their secure supply chain. So we've seen like the letter from L3 Harris came out, and some other primes have started saying, well, okay, November is great for certain things, but we need you to have your certification in place. Maybe it's by the end of July. And so that way you can still continue to do business with us. And again, that's really just a matter of them doing their due diligence, having their secure supply chain lined up, but that does trickle down to the subcontractors. So whether you may be wanting to bid on contracts, future contracts that will have the certification rolled into those, coming out in November of this year and later, you do have to factor in the fact that your primes are having to make sure that you can help them be compliant and meet all of their compliance requirements as well. So we've seen a few recently. Early in the year, we have seen some come out and say, we need your self-assessment results entered by this certain date. We need it to be at least a certain score. So I picture as we get closer and closer to November deadline that we're going to see like more and more of these become, released to the public.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been talking to clients and prospects about it for a long time. It's it's whatever your prime say if you're a sub. So it's just stick in there, go ahead and start talking to your contracting officers if you don't already know the dates that you're planning for. There's definitely going to be able to tell you what their expectations are and give you a good timeline on what to be working on. It's definitely shifted from planning to proof, and timelines are no longer fully in our control. But the good news is there is still time. Now's a better time than any, or just as good as any, to go ahead and get started on getting compliant ready for sure. All right, so a lot of people are asking questions about C3PAO scheduling. I hear all the time, there's so many thousand contractors and only so many C3PAOs. So let's actually talk about assessment scheduling. A lot of organizations assume we'll schedule when we're ready, but that's not how it's playing out. We're seeing limited availability from C3PAOs. Organizations are having to take whatever slots are open. There's a lot less flexibility in choosing timing and even which provider that you may want to use. So we have clients right now who have a target week in mind. So they'll come to me and they'll say, Adam, we want to get our C3PAO scheduled. We're planning for week 3 of September. And we're like, okay, great. Have you talked to them yet? No. Okay, well, that's probably booked. You need to go ahead and call them, get availability. You just don't know. So you talk to whatever C3POs you want to talk to, but just know that the sooner the better as far as getting more choice on whenever you want to actually go through this. And we've had some people that had a target week in mind, as I was mentioning, and they couldn't get it. They had to take just whatever was available. And here's the reality. Everyone is running towards the finish line right now. Some deadlines may vary, but many are very similar. And really, what people think to be true, if everybody's thinking November is our deadline right now, then a lot of people are just running towards that finish line. So with that being said, that does create a supply and demand issue for preparation resources and assessments themselves. The earlier you start, the more options you're going to have, the more control you're going to have, the better your partners you can choose, whoever's the best fit. The later you wait, the fewer choices that you're going to have, the more rush it's going to become, and you're going to be forced to really just take whatever's available. Jacqueline, what are you seeing in terms of availability and flexibility whenever organizations are waiting too long to schedule?
Yeah, what we've seen is kind of like you mentioned. We haven't had anyone that's had to completely switch to a different C3PO, but what we have seen is the weeks they had in mind are likely already taken, especially when rollouts in November. So a lot of people we talk to, they're thinking September, October. And I already know several organizations who have September and October days already booked because they've already had those conversations with a C3PO. So odds are, your preferred week is probably 15 other people's preferred week. And so you likely, if you contact someone now and if your date's pretty far out, you're likely to be more successful in getting that week you want. I will say especially if you plan on having one in the next few months, I'd probably not realistic because they are booked out probably at least 2 or 3 months, if not 6 months at this point. Because like I said, we have several clients that are scheduled throughout the entire rest of the year. So they are scheduling further out. You don't have to wait until 4 weeks or 6 weeks before you're ready to actually have your certification assessment begin. They are talking to people now, scheduling out. We even have some scheduled for first part of next year. So definitely, I would say if you especially are, have a very strict that we can only do this week because this person's in the office, or we can only do this. We can't do this week because someone's on vacation. If you have those limitations, I would go ahead and start talking to a C3PO now so that you can get your preferred week, or it's more likely, I guess, you can get your preferred week.
Absolutely. And another thing that we're going to actually talk about when it comes to going ahead and getting things scheduled at your earliest convenience. And by the way, make sure you're ready. You don't want to schedule a C3PO assessment and you're like, man, I'm not ready or have no clue when I'm going to be ready. So obviously, wait till you're ready or you know that you're going to be before you do that. But once I guess what I'm saying is don't push off getting ready and don't push off getting it scheduled once or know that you're ready to go. You definitely want to pass the first time you're there. You don't want to redo that. So again, make sure you're ready. But let's talk a little bit about the cost of delaying, because delay is not just about the timeline. It definitely can impact your contract eligibility, your revenue opportunities that you have, competitive positioning versus maybe other subcontractors that are not yet compliant. We are already seeing organizations who have missed opportunities, not because they aren't capable, but because they are not ready at the right time. Another thing is I've seen people sign some contracts already and they're not ready yet. They're having to rush now to be able to get there, and they realize that that's not actually going to be awarded or carried out unless they can prove that they are indeed compliant ready. So Jacqueline, what really happens when an organization waits too long and they're trying to accelerate everything all at once?
It's fairly successful. We'll say that. So basically, CMC is not something you do overnight. It takes a lot of time and a lot of effort, and different things go into play. So it's not just an IT effort. Human resources is involved. Company leadership needs to make sure that everyone across the company understands that this is a priority. This can cost us a significant amount of money, revenue coming in for these lost contracts. So you have to get all aspects of the company involved. Marketing, if posting content on public accessible, um, posting content publicly, whoever does that, your marketing team, whether it's HR, somebody else, they also have to meet requirements. There are certain controls that are applicable to that as well. And so, do you have an MSP? Do you not have an MSP? A lot of these things, maybe you have to put in a technical solution, maybe you have MFA rolled out, maybe you allow mobile devices to access CUI, which therefore you would need a mobile device management solution to put into place. None of these things are overnight implementations. If they are, it's rush, maybe the configurations aren't going to be correct, and then at the time of the assessment, you can't show proof of implementation. And another thing people don't understand is how much documentation goes into CMC requirements. A lot of it is governance. You document what you say you're doing, you have proof that you're doing that, and then you're able to talk about the things you're doing. And if any of those three are missing, sometimes that can cause you to have a not met finding on the assessment. And only certain things are allowed to be put on a POEM that can be fixed within 180 days. And so then at that point, your assessment's not successful. So if you wait too long, try to cram everything in at once. It is a lot of it's a lot of stress on your employees as well. And then again, it's not likely to be successful because it's designed to be a thought out process, right? So 110 controls, there's 320 objectives, and that's very time consuming. And so it needs to take the proper time to do it right and to do it correctly, because if not, odds are you're going to have to rework and redo your assessment.
Absolutely. Definitely don't want to do that. And you definitely want to get it done in a time frame that you can show that you've been doing it for a while. So maturity and what it is that you're doing versus just kind of scrambling to get it all together. And again, people like us here at Mad Security will help you with whatever your goals are. We'll lay out expectations on this is what you're going to need to do to get there, and we'll come to the conclusion together of what's realistic for you to be able to get things done. So we do work on all sorts of time frames. We're not telling you that you can't rush if you have to, but we're saying if you have the opportunity, give yourself a little time. All right, so let's talk a little bit about readiness versus confidence. I'm sorry, my screen's frozen here. Just a moment, technical difficulty. All right. So this is one of the biggest gaps we see. There is a difference between thinking that you're ready and knowing that you're ready. A lot of organizations that we talk to say, we think we're in a good place. Or, yeah, I think we're going to pass the audit. But when we actually evaluate, they come to us because they want some validation. We'll see that maybe sometimes there's documentation gaps that exist, or that the evidence isn't aligned, or controls aren't fully implemented, or maybe they can't prove consistency. That's the difference, thinking versus knowing. Confidence without validation is risky because the C3PAO isn't evaluating what you think, they're evaluating what you can prove. Jacqueline, in our experience, how often do you see organizations that feel confident but not actually meet the standard once you dig in?
So we've had a lot of companies come to us, sign up for a gap assessment, and they say, we're just kind of treating you as a final check just to make sure everything's fine before we go into our C3PO assessment. And we have yet to not find at least one thing. It's always more than one. It's due to the fact that maybe they didn't have the right documentation in place. Maybe they had a misinterpretation of the control. They thought it meant something else, but in our experience, we know that it means something else. So it's usually those kind of things. And so I would say at least probably a 50-point difference from where they thought they were at a 110 versus what their assessment score ends up being after the gap assessment. So these gap assessments are very valuable. Even if you do think you have a really good understanding of control, highly suggest you get a gap assessment by a team who has the training required to set on an assessment team. Like that's at Mad Security. We have several people in our department. I run the compliance department. I've gotten CCP certification, CCA certification. I'm a designated lead CCA. I could technically run an assessment team, a C3PO team. Other people in my department has similar certifications. And so another advantage of the Mad Security virtual compliance manager service is part of what we do is we say that if the client chooses us to have us do so, we will sit in on the C3PO assessment along with you, act as another set of, eyes and ears and help you if you, get stumbled across something. If the assessor asks you a question you don't understand, we can help you interpret that. And then also we could do things like if they ask you something and we could say, well, you have this, why don't you show them that? So all that being said, we have a lot of real world experience at this point with setting it on C3PO assessments. We know what certain assessors ask for each of these controls. And so there's a lot of experience that goes into that, if you do try to do on your own, you just don't have that experience. You just don't have any way of gaining that unless you've gone through this process. So all that being said, I highly recommend you get a gap assessment by a company that has that experience and has those qualifications, because they actually know what the assessor is going to be asking you and can help you prepare yourself, prepare your team for going through the assessment. And odds are, if you do that, you'll be more successful than trying to do it on your own.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree with you, Jacqueline. We were just having a conversation yesterday about mock assessments, or you could do the gap, depending on what phase you're in. And it's basically like the scrimmage before the big game. You want to make sure that you have everything in a row and that you're going to be successful once the real assessment gets here. So definitely make sure that you're ready and confident going into it for sure. All right, so let's talk about the organizations who are getting this right. The organizations that are not guessing, they're very intentional with what they're doing. And one of the biggest things that they do is this. They recognize early that they don't have everything figured out, and that's okay. They acknowledge gaps. They bring in the right help. They stay on task, knocking out what they've still have gaps in, and they commit to doing everything right the first time because they know they do not want to do this twice. We've kind of talked about this a little bit today already. They don't have the time or the bandwidth or the budget to redo this process. I hear all the time, I haven't done CMMC because I am so busy. We've been so tied up with other things. We've had some companies just talk about that they don't have the staffing for it. Well, the thing is that if you don't have it to do it the first time around, you're definitely not going to have it to redo the process. So the companies that are getting this right know we've got to get this right the first time. So they get aligned, they stay focused, and they execute. So, Jacqueline, what stands out most about the organizations who take this approach versus the ones who are trying to piece it together as they go?
Yeah, usually they're more successful in our experience. So if you can start by identifying gaps, what you need to remediate, what you need to have in place to meet the requirements of control, lay out a plan, a roadmap. This is what we may need to do the next 2 weeks. And then, okay, let's finish that. What do we need to do after that? And things can be worked on in parallel. Maybe your IT team is working on technical configurations while another set of people are working on your documentation. So a planned approach is very, systematic, but you have achievable milestones, a project plan in place, and you can check it off. And plus, the benefit of doing that is you can show the higher ups the benefit of you devoting your time that's not billable to something else, to the CMC efforts. And so that also pays off like in multiple ways as well. So if you try to piece it together and don't have a plan and don't have what to do, you try to do things ad hoc. Usually what ends up happening is you're scrambling around. You make progress on something, you drop that, pick something else up. And what you end up doing is having a lot of unfinished projects that still need to be completed. And there's no plan to get those completed. So Definitely the systematic, methodical approach is the way to go. And we've seen a lot more people be successful if they do that versus the, chaos way of doing it.
Definitely agreed, for sure. Okay, so one of the biggest disconnects we see is this. Organizations want to move forward, but maybe resources aren't allocated. Um, Maybe teams aren't aligned. The budget isn't fully planned yet. There's no clear roadmap yet. And this is where things often stall within a company. This is where MAD Security can definitely help. We can help you build the roadmap. We can define the milestones. Again, earlier we talked about what are your goals when you want to be compliant ready to buy. Let us help lay out what that looks like and what's going to have to be done from point A to point B to point C to be able to get you across the certified line. If it's unrealistic for your company, then we can either move that date out or we can talk about maybe bringing resources in to make it sooner, different things that we can do. Then we can help you do things like create a realistic path forward for you and align your timeline, your structure, and your budget. Because without a plan, progress is often inconsistent. So Jacqueline, what changes when an organization moves from we need to do this to having a clear roadmap?
So essentially at that point, they can schedule out the things that they need to do. So if you have a gap assessment, like I mentioned, lay out what the remediation is. You maybe you give yourself 7 months to do your remediation. So we used to say in the past, 12 months minimum to implement CMC. Well, now at this point, 6 to 9 months is probably a realistic expectation. Anything less than that, um, you do run the risk of, can you really get it done? Because things are coming to place, PTO, people on vacations, life events happen, people leave, key personnel may, move off to a different company, you have new hires. But if you do have a structure plan in place, you say, hey, I'm giving myself 7 months. Months one, we're going to do this. Months two, do that. 3, 4, and then that will let you build things into your daily, work tasks because you still have your normal daily operations that you have to do. You still have all your current responsibilities, and you essentially, you can more manageable fit it into your daily work than you can as if you say, I am giving myself 1 month. I therefore cannot do any of these other internal tasks that I'm supposed to do, help other people within the company, do this billable work for, our clients, things like that. So that's what we see. If you can lay out the plan, lay out your schedule, have build it into your work week, you're going to be a lot more successful by having that roadmap.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And it's not that you have to stick 100% to it. It's just you need that roadmap so that we can have a plan, we can move forward, we can adapt as things go because things change. Again, like we talked about, sometimes things take twice as long as you originally planned on working through it. So we're going to help you stick to that roadmap as close as possible and help you set realistic expectations based on, what you can do and what you've already got in place and where we need to go. All right, so let's make this very practical. As you move into Q2, the biggest thing is you need a goal. So at this point, if you're like, I do have CUI, or I do have CMMC or DFARS in my contracts, or I am going to, or yes, I am going to pursue this business, when are you trying to be ready? You've got to have a goal of some sort. How are you going to get there? That's the next question you have to ask yourself. What are the milestones? What is the roadmap? You've got to be able to ask yourself those questions and answer it. If you can't answer those things, then maybe you could get with somebody like Matt and we can help you with these things. These are all things that you've got to ask yourself. Then you have to ask, do we truly understand where we stand today? Or do we know exactly what gaps exist? Or do we have a structured plan to close them? Or have we aligned our timeline with reality, with our bandwidth, with our budget? If you don't have those answers, then that's where you start. And if you need help building that plan, again, that's exactly what we do. But one thing is certain, you cannot flip the switch and become compliant overnight. So you have to start. Jacqueline, what's the first step an organization should take if they realize that they don't have a clear plan in place already today?
Sure. So I really highly recommend a gap assessment. Have it by a third party that understands CMC, not just understands compliance frameworks in general. CMC is different from other ones. You do have to meet requirements. You can't choose to accept the risk and not implement certain controls. And some of the controls are hard to interpret. What do these really mean? What should I really put into place? So definitely gap assessment thing one. After that, I highly recommend having a consultant, whether it's, Mass Security's virtual compliance manager service, a consultant would be assigned to you, or if you have, third-party assistance, maybe you just hire someone temporary to do that. Someone who understands CMC and can help you implement it, understand exactly what you need to do. And that way, you don't require rework. You're not trying to figure out yourself by watching, YouTube videos or trying to read between the lines or anything like that. Coming over all this documentation, government regulations. So hiring someone or having a third party assist you is probably the biggest advice I would give you. But if you can't, for some reason you do need to do it internally, try to identify your gaps, have a clear plan, lay it out, action items, measurable milestones, and then try to have a quick win right away. And then that way your team doesn't get discouraged. You can say, hey, look what we've done. Here's where we're at. Let's keep going. Let's keep moving forward. We're benefit the company. This is, revenue. This will affect future revenue and future success of the company, which therefore, will trickle down to you, job security. Make sure you keep your job. So just keep the momentum going, set the plan, stick with it. And then, yeah, that's the best thing. Just have that plan going forward and then try to stick to it.
Absolutely. Wonderful advice for sure. All right. So before we move on to the Q&A, I'll just leave you with this. If a C3PAO showed up in 90 days, what would happen? Would you feel prepared or would it feel rushed? Would you be caught off guard? Because that answer tells you exactly where you stand. As Jacqueline said, if it's Mad Security or if it's somebody else, it doesn't matter. If you do need assistance with it, seek that out. Even if you contact Mad Security and we have a conversation, we'll be real with you if we feel like that there's anything that kind of separates you from most cases to where we wouldn't be able to assist and help you get there. But that, again, is what we do. So it's definitely something we'd love to talk with you about. And then in the end, let you make the decision to see if Mad Security or somebody else is the best fit to assist you with your CMMC journey. But what's most important is that you just make a decision. It doesn't have to be with us. It's whatever's right for you and your company. All right, so we will go ahead now and go into the live Q&A. If you've not been to one of these in the past, you can actually go to the Q&A and you can put your question in there. We'll get to as many as we can. We will stop just a couple of minutes before we're over because we do have a couple of giveaways that we're going to get to. So, I know we've covered a lot today. Every organization situation is a little different. So let's go ahead and open it up for questions. Of course, again, we have Jacqueline Jones. She is our GRC lead here who works directly with organizations navigating these challenges every day. So this is a great opportunity to be able to ask someone that's had the experience of going through these C3PAO audits and helping dozens of clients prepare for this. So go ahead and get those questions in and we will answer them in the order as they come in. So just a moment, I'm going to pull the live questions coming in up here. Got a couple here. We'll give everybody just another 30 seconds or so to get everything submitted, and we will get started here. All right, so keep them coming. We will go ahead and get to as many as we can. I promise you, if you ask us a question and I cannot get to it, or Jacqueline and I cannot get to it during this town hall, we will reach back out right after it's over to be able to get your question answered. So please go ahead and put all the questions that you have there. Keep them coming in. All right, Jacqueline, first question that we have, gentlemen ask, how early should we schedule our C3PAO assessment?
Sure. So you can contact C3PAO today. So I would really recommend, especially if you have certain weeks that you can't have your assessment, Go ahead and schedule it. Nothing to say that you have to be ready. You have to have all 110 controls be implemented right now, because what they'll do is closer to the time of assessment. This is really just getting the contract in place, reserving your weeks. Closer to the assessment is where they're going to have those conversations, just as a scoping meeting. They're going to have closer to that, they'll have another, they'll ask you to submit your documentation within X number of days for your assessment week. They'll make the final determination if you are ready to proceed that week. If not, they will reschedule it. So there's nothing to say that you can't contact the C3PO. I highly recommend you don't wait until a month or two out from the time that you want to have it, because likely you're not going to get those weeks, because they are getting booked up pretty fast, especially if in the short term versus long term. Several months out, we haven't seen them be as booked up. But I will say September is becoming very popular. You probably won't get a week. October, because everyone's trying to get it done before the November. They consider that their deadline, which is really just it's when phase 2 of the rollout begins. Isn't really you have to be certified by November 10th, anything like that. It's really just the start of phase 2. But yeah, definitely don't delay. Just go ahead and contact them, whenever you want. Contact them today, tomorrow, whatever. And the important thing is getting on their schedule.
Perfect. No, I'm glad you answered that way, because I may have misled a little bit earlier about making sure that you're ready. But yeah, no, Jacqueline, that's great advice to go ahead and get it done so that you can get those weeks selected. And I like what you talked about. They'll work with them on making sure they're ready before they go into it. So no, that's awesome. All right, we do have another question here. Do you recommend OSCs attesting to level 1 while they pursue level 2?
Sure. So definitely can attest to level 1 at any point. So level 1, if your environments can be either the same as your level 2 environment, or it could be something different. Level 1 is for federal contractor information. Level 2 is for controlled and classified information. If it's not, especially if it's not the same environment, if you are treating those as two completely separate scopes, attest to level 1. I mean, definitely go ahead and do that. Even if it's the same environment, you can attest to level 1. I will say though, if you're going to do that, when you do that, not really if, when you do that, make sure that you have reviewed all the requirements for all those controls. Make sure you have evidence to back it up. Collect that, keep it in a repository somewhere, because someone does have to go in and say, I attest that we are meeting all the requirements. And there are, possible legal ramifications of doing so if you actually aren't meeting the requirements. But that being said, definitely there's nothing to say wait till level 2 is done before you test to level 1. I mean, I would just go ahead and do your level 1 test if you have meet all the requirements of control.
All right, great question. Sir, if that question was not answered fully for you, if there's something else you want to elaborate on, you can go ahead and put that in there as well. But as of right now, we'll go ahead and move on to the next question. Let's see. All right, Jacqueline, lady asked, what if we're not, you answered this a moment ago, I believe, but we'll go ahead and do it again, because we can elaborate maybe. What if we're not at a 100 SPRS score yet?
Sure. So to be considered first off, if you're doing a self-assessment, you will not be certified by entering a self-assessment. Basically, you're saying that you are, compliant and you're meeting the requirements of CMC. So if you have at least achieved an 88, and that there's nothing that, no 3-point, no 5-point controls are open, things like that. At that point, you still need to have all those open controls on a POEM. You need to be actively working toward that. But as far as if that was supposed to be in relation to scheduling C3PO, that don't wait till you're at a 110 to schedule the C3PO. You can. You don't necessarily not have to wait to schedule a C3PO, but that 110 is your ultimate goal. And then at that point, if you think about it, there are certain things you have to do after you achieve the 110. You have to review, make sure your documentation's in place. You need to prepare yourself and your team for the certification assessment, and that is time consuming. You have to make sure your HR knows how to describe onboarding, offboarding, employee transfers. Your marketing team that posts information publicly, make sure they understand what their procedures are that they have to talk to the assessor about. because when the assessor has your, when they do your C3PO certification assessment, it's not just let me talk to the IT team, it's let me talk to the people who implement these controls on a daily basis. So whoever that is, if you have a third-party MSP, a managed security service provider, they will be part of your certification assessment as well. If you have an MSP who has not gone through their own assessment, or they've helped another client through their assessment, it's going to be brand new to them. You need to prep them for what they're going to be asked about as well. So there again, so have a 110, but that's not the end all. There are things to do after that to prepare for the assessment. So I would just I would not wait to schedule the C3PO if that was what that question was referenced to.
Good deal. Good deal. All right. We do still have about 5 or 6 questions here, but to be respectful of your time, we did promise you in the invitation this would last till 2:45 Central Time. So we've only got about 4 minutes left during this. So what we will do is we will reach out, make sure that we get all of these questions answered before the day's over with. And we're going to move on because I want to be able to get to the giveaways and tell you a little bit about what to expect next month as well. So stick here with us. So what you'll see here on the screen now, whenever we actually send this out, you'll be able to get these links as well after we do send out this town hall webinar. But we do have some giveaways for you. And what these giveaways here are going to be a free pre-assessment. This is where you can actually go answer 31 questions, yes, no, or not sure, about different questions about your CMMC status, and it's going to give us a good idea on if you are ready or not. You're going to have the free CMMC master bundle, and in that you're going to have everything from what to expect in an assessment to document about enclaves, and there's going to be just lots of great information in there all around CMMC. You have the free CMMC assessment guide, which is going to be talking about that complete roadmap to being certified. And then the last thing here, you do have both my email address and my scheduling link. You can be more than welcome to use those to actually schedule time for us to have a conversation. Because again, if we do have a conversation and we're not the right fit, at least maybe myself or someone here at Mad Security can assist you with making the decision that makes sense for you and your company to actually getting you CMMC Level 2 certified and across the finish line. So we can just have a discussion around what you're currently doing for cybersecurity and compliance readiness and see if and how we might be able to assist. And if we cannot, for whatever reason, point you in the direction that would be a better fit for you and your company. So please feel free to schedule or send me an email with any other questions that you may have. And then we will wrap this up today with a big thank you as always. Before we finish, I would like to say, again, thank you. Q1 is behind us. Q2 is your opportunity to reevaluate, adjust, and move forward with clarity. In May, we're going to be able to take this a step further with a session that's titled Building the Right Team for CMMC, while the right MSP and the CMMC-focused MSSP combination matters. We had talked to a lot of companies. They're like, should we separate out our MSP and our MSSP? Should we do it internally? Should we use somebody that's CMMC Level 2 certified? What should we look for whenever we're picking our MSP and our MSSPs? So what we're going to walk through is some things like why separation of duties matter, the difference between IT and cybersecurity roles, what to look for in the right partners and the right combination of partners, actually, not just partners, but how to fit together your MSP and your MSSP, and how to build structure that actually supports long-term compliance. Then in June, we're actually going to take it one step further. We'll be joined by one of our MSP partners for a live session where we walk through how the MSP and the MSSP work together while keeping duties separated and to support your full CMMC environment. It'll be one of our partners that we work with several of our clients. We'll be able to come on. You'll be able to ask questions to us on the Mad Security side, as well as with our MSP partner. So we will have us all on there. You'll be able to hear from us, ask questions during the live Q&A session. And if you have questions after today, or you want help building your roadmap, we're here to help. So thanks again for your time. Have a great day, and we will see you in May.